Okay, so in this lecture, we will discuss Markov decision process. So before going into the details of this Markov decision process, we will gradually understand each of these terms one by one. And then finally, we will understand what this Markov decision process is all about. So let's start discussing about Markov decision process, but from scratch. So basically, if you recall my earlier lecture, we had seen this example where agent was actually roaming around in the grid environment, which was around this particular around this agent. So it was this agent was interacting with this environment, and we had seen that how this agent is actually with the experience it is gaining with interaction with the environment, it is deciding its action with each iteration. So these type of interactions between the agent and the environment in which it is present, that can be modeled mathematically with using the Markov decision process. So now you understand why we need Markov decision processes. Basically, it provides the mathematical framework for solving the reinforcement learning problems, as an example which I had given in our last lecture. So this is a typical reinforcement learning problem, and this interaction of the agent with the environment will be mathematically formulated using Markov decision process. So let's discuss Markov decision process. So first of all, here I have divided different type of Markov processes depending upon the states and the actions. So basically, if all the states are observable, then here we have this answer as yes. Or if the states are not observable, that some of the states are observable and some of them are not. Regarding this, I have discussed already in our earlier lecture, that is, states are actually subset of the observations. So if the states, if all the states are equal to the observations, then we say that it's completely observable. So we are saying yes over here, otherwise it's no. Similarly, the actions, whether they are involved in the problem or not. So if the actions are not there, then we have no to it, and if the actions are there, then we are saying yes. So based on the actions and the states, we have different type of Markov modeling. So if you have, if the states are observable and you are taking no actions, then it's a very simple case of Markov chain. But if the states are observable, all the states are observable, and the actions that you are also taking within these states, then we have Markov decision process. Similarly, if all the states are not observable, that is some of the states, that is states are the subsets of observation, then in that case, if no action is taken, then we have hidden Markov models in that case. And the last one is partially observable Markov decision processes, where you take actions also. In this case, there are no actions involved, but here you have actions. So we have partially observable Markov decision processes. In reinforcement learning, we will be mainly focusing on Markov decision processes, but we will gradually move to understand what they are one by one. So this is the very simplistic case of Markov chain. We will start from this and then we will gradually move to this. Later down the lecture series, we will be discussing partially observable Markov decision processes also. So let's understand each of these terms which are there in this definition, what they actually mean to us. So the first term that we encounter while reading this Markov decision process is Markov. So let us see what this Markov is and what it means to be there in this Markov decision process. So Markov is a Russian mathematician. So we will discuss details about it later, but what it says is there is a Markov property. What Markov property states is that the future depends only on the present and not on the past. So that is basically the Markov property. That is, our future states, the future states that we are basically interested in, depends upon the present state in which the agent is, and it doesn't depend upon the past states that the agent was earlier. So mathematically, if you want to express this in probabilistic terms, it can be represented in this fashion, where the probability of the futuristic state, which is s of t plus 1. So here the subscript t plus 1 means one time ahead of the present, which is at time t. So right now agent is in state st, and when you say s of t plus 1 means you are in futuristic state. So what Markov property states is that the probability of the transition from the present state to the future state, which is s of t plus 1, this t plus 1 is the time index in future, where t is the present index. So what it says is the probability of the st plus 1 given the present state st is equal to the probability of the futuristic state given all the past states up to st. So you can see here up to st, all the information in the states of the agent are recorded, and s of t plus 1 depends upon all these history. So what Markov says is that you do not need to remember all this history. What is important is the present state from where you are actually doing this transition to st plus 1. So basically it's a way of the history is basically fully condensed. This all history which is there up to s of t minus 1 is fully condensed in s of t, and that's why we have p of st plus 1 given st and not all the other future past states. So past observations are completely irrelevant if we have Markov property imposed onto the problem. So let us see more specifically what it tries to say in simple terms. So what it says is, if the next state that the environment will transition, the next state in which the environment will transition depends only on the current state and not on the past. So this is what I have explained you in details in our earlier slide. So this process is basically called as a Markov property, named after the Russian mathematician Andrew Markov. Okay, so let me give you two practical examples where this Markov property will hold, and in the second example it will not hold. So let's discuss these two practical examples. So this is basically a very famous Rubik cube game, and I hope everybody knows what this game is all about and what we are trying to achieve here in this particular game. So what I am trying to say here is that we have some past states, we have some present states, and we have some futuristic states, and here states are represented in the form of the cube itself, like in which position this cube is at a particular point. So if you are at this particular point, this is your present state, and if you turn around this cube in either direction, then you will be moving to the futuristic state, which can be represented in this way. And in the past, you might have this state or this state from where you reached this particular state. So if you recall in our earlier examples where agent was in this environment, so basically here we had different states which the environment was giving in the form of these cubes here, right? So A is a state, then we have a B state, then we have F state, then we have E state. And in case of Mario game, I already discussed that the screen of that game, which is changing every time whenever Mario is performing some action, that screen was a state. So here in this case, the state is the particular orientation of the cube. So now what I am trying to say here is that the present state which you are in, when you want to go to the future, this future actually depends only on the present state, and it doesn't matter that you either came from this past history to this or from this past history to this. This you can realize yourself also, that the futuristic state in which you want to move depends only on the present state from where you are currently. So you will orient this cube this direction or this direction or this direction, wherever you want, but the future that you are getting from this present state is independent of the past state that you had already, from where you reached the present state. So this future is completely independent upon the past, but it depends upon the present state. So this particular game of Rubik cube follows the Markov property. So let us discuss another game which do not follow the Markov property, and that game is a breakout game in Atari. So if you look at this, I am presenting different screens here. So this screens on the left side are the past states, two different past states from where you can reach to this particular present state, and from this present state we can have two different futuristic states, as you can see over here. So this is a typical breakout game in Atari, and the rules of Atari is that you have only you have this slider which you can move to the left or to the right. So this is basically the action that you can take, the agent. So this is basically an agent, so it can move to the left or to the right, and the objective is to break these bricks as many as possible using this ball which is actually roaming around here and there. So what you have to do is you have to actually control this ball so that it should not fall down. So this agent has to be moved left and right so that ball should always bounce onto this slider, and then after rebouncing from here it should break some of the bricks. So these are basically the observations that a particular agent is getting. So and it's in the form of a computer screen. So what I'm trying to show over here is that the futuristic state, let us say this state, here you can see the ball is going down in this direction. So this direction, it cannot be predicted from the present state, because in present state you have ball in this at this particular point, but you do not know whether this ball will go this side or this side. So this ball which is over here in the futuristic state can go down, depends on the past, like in which so in the past state, if the ball is going down, definitely this ball here will also go down in this direction. So somewhere down the line, the futuristic state which is given over here depends upon the past state which is over here. So if from the history that ball was going down like this, so it's quite possible that this ball will go down in this direction, so you have to move right. Similarly, the direction of going up here in the futuristic state here depends upon whether the past state in which the ball was earlier was going up or down. So if it was going up, then definitely the chances are that the ball will be in the futuristic state going up, and it doesn't depend upon the present state which is given over here. So you cannot decide from this state that whether the ball will go up or down. So it needs the information of the past state to determine whether this ball will go this side or will it go this side. So here the Markov property is actually violated. So that means we cannot apply reinforcement learning problems to this. No, it's not like that. Basically, if Markov property is violated, there are some ways in which you can actually make a Markov property valid by changing the conditions. So by saying that means, what I'm trying to say here is that even if the Markov property is violated, so what we will do is we will take these three consecutive frames like this as a state. So if we take three consecutive frames like the past, the present and the future, so if I take these three frames in consecutive form, then we can say that this is a particular state, and in this state our Markov property is valid. So we will take these three frames combined together. Or the second solution, maybe you can use RNNs in reinforcement learning problems. So RNN, if you recall, it actually keeps track of the earlier samples that they have seen. So it has a long-term dependencies type of thing, like LSTMs, GRUs, they have a long-term dependencies. So we can use that long-term dependencies also to store the previous information, so that these previous information or previous states information can be used to predict the future information as of t+1. So either you can combine these three frames together to satisfy the Markov property, or you can use RNNs in the reinforcement learning algorithms to do that. So these are the two typical solutions. either of it can work. So in order to mathematically quantify the transitions that the agent is taking from state st to st plus 1, we have a state transition matrix. So this is the state transition matrix which actually keeps record of the transitions that an agent is taking from st to different states, the different futuristic states. So given a Markov state st at a current time t, if it is at state s, and its successor st plus 1 state as s dash. So this is the present state st, and it's written in the written as small s here, and the successor state means the futuristic state s of t plus 1 given as s prime. So given these two situations, the state transition probability for all the tuples s and s dash that belongs to a capital set S that contains all the possible states in this set. Like for example, you have S1, S2, S3 till Sn. So all these states are in this capital S. So for a tuple that is between that, for a tuple S comma S prime, what we do is we actually define the state transition matrix, which is given by P of S prime given S. And in some of the literature you will find that this representation is also represented in this form, which is PSS prime. So both these representations are valid, but sometimes it's confusing because some of the books will be using this and some of the books will be using this. So there is a slight inconsistency in the literature related to the conventions that we use for different type of symbols in reinforcement learning. We will get to know all these things later on, but for now you can take this down that PSS prime means what you are actually writing is probability of S prime given S. So basically this state transition probability is represented in the form of matrix, where each of these elements are basically the probability of transitioning from one state to another state. So here the rows actually represents that from which state you are currently in, and the columns states represent where you are actually jumping to. So if you have n states S1, S2 till Sn, so here also you will have S1, S2 till Sn. So if a agent is in state S1 and if it stays in S1, then the probability of that is given by P11. If the agent is in state S1 and it jumps to state S2, then the corresponding probability of moving, or you can say the corresponding transition probability of moving from S1 to S2 is given by P12. And similarly you can see for the other elements of this matrix. And note that its dimension is n cross n, where n are the number of states present in the state capital S. So this is basically the state transition matrix that we will be using extensively for in our future analysis, when we will be going into more details of Markov decision process. And the important property that you have to note here is that if you sum along the columns for a particular row, the value will come out to be 1. So what it tries to say is that if you are in state, if you are in particular state and if you are going to different states from this particular state, then the summation of these transition probabilities of going from this state to different states, summation of all these transition probabilities will turn out to be equal to 1. So that is what this particular mathematical representation is saying, is basically this graphical representation. So this is actually equivalent to what I have just explained you here graphically. So for a particular row, if you sum down all the columns, its value will come out to be 1. This is a property of the state transition matrix. That's it for today. In the next lecture, we will go into more details about understanding different aspects of Markov decision process.